Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast where we use storytelling and expert interviews to widen the lens on what it means to be a happy and healthy endurance athlete. We believe that athletes are so much more than their body, sport, and training miles. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards.
And I'm Dr. Casey Sinders. We are endurance athletes, physical therapists, and huge coffee addicts. We spend most of our time treating, educating, and working with endurance athletes. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now let's get to the show.
Tonight, we're talking with Genie Beaver. Genie is the owner of WestStride, a specialty store in Atlanta, Georgia. Genie opened WestStride with a mission to cater to all different levels of running, track and field athletes, and women. I've had the pleasure of working with Genie on many projects, including 2 book signings. Everything that she has done is top-notch, and she's created such an accepting, welcoming, and vibrant community around her store. We really have been so excited to have her on the show.
In this episode, we talk about Genie's running story and how running runs in her family, if you will, how she started WestStride, what the mission was behind it, how she made WestStride welcome to runners of all types and abilities. We talked about how difficult it was when she started WestStride and also the difficulties of COVID and the pandemic in this past year and a half or so. So we really hope that you enjoy this conversation. It covers a lot of ground and it's a lot of fun. So please enjoy our conversation with Genie Beaver of WestStride.
Genie, thank you so much for coming to our podcast tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Casey and I were talking about this season and we were trying to figure out who our guest would be. And we had wanted you to be on last season. And we were like, we definitely have to ask Genie this season just because we love your store. We love what you do for the community. I love how you focus on women. The first thing that we usually start with is we like people to tell us their running story. So tell us kind of how running started for you and about your love of running.
Yeah, it's a long story, actually.
Well, great.
I grew up in a family where running was part of our life. So the first thing I kind of remember was my dad running and then drinking ice water, sitting on this like swing, you know, those old metal swing sets and eating apples. Like that's like this memory of my childhood. My dad was this guy who ran quite a bit, like that 70s runner dude. That was my dad. But he also had ran track and he grew up in Ireland. That was the sport he loved. My uncle was a very successful coach in this country as well. And he actually passed away this summer. And I might tear up here, but he was a phenomenal, coach, person, and influence in my life. I grew up in Oklahoma and he coached in Arkansas. So, a lot of my early running memories were watching the Hogs, race all around Oklahoma and Kansas and Arkansas. As a kid, I loved it. I mean, you just go out there and hang out in the woods for cross country races or watch the gun go off 50,000 times at a track meet. And it was a lot of fun. But my dad and my uncle were really close. So I grew up kind of watching the sport. But my parents, my mom wasn't really into running. And my dad put no pressure on me to do it. It was whatever. And my uncle never brought it up. And eventually, when I was in 7th grade, I went out for cross country. Well, that's not true. I ran a mile once, a time. You had to predict your time. And the closest person to the time they predicted was the winner. So I wasn't the fastest person, but I ran the closest time to my predicted time. So I won. And I still have that trophy.
Ooh, good pacer. Love it.
I think it was actually just sheer luck. But then I ran track in 7th grade, cross country. And I always like to tell this to kids who things don't work out for or whatever the first time. I quit cross country the first season I ran.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Why?
I walked. Mainly because I forgot to get my permission slip form aside. And they told me, and I was on the public bus, the school bus, and they said, well, you can go to the meet, but you're not going to get to race today. And I was like, well, I'm not driving on this bus to the meet then, I crack up. That's the 80s for you. They let me get off and walk home. Like that just is amazing. like on a road. Not on like a sidewalk in a neighborhood, on a busy street with my violin case and my backpack. So my mother was like, what are you doing? So anyway, and after that, I think I was too embarrassed to go back. So really just because I had...
Running's hard, but getting that permission slip is even harder.
It's really hard. Exactly. But I'm just telling you can make a mistake or two. You can flub up. But then I tried volleyball and that was terrible. So I went back to running. So I ran track. And once I got into high school, I loved track. I had some early success with it, worked hard, and I had more success with it. Didn't think I was going to run in college though, honestly. And then all of a sudden, my senior year, I had a really great season and was like, this is a good opportunity and I want to do it. went off to Georgetown and ran there. I look back on my college running experience with amazingly fond memories. For most of it, it was challenging. It's not something that I wouldn't push my children, nor would I tell somebody that it's something you have to do, but it was good. I had a lot of injuries and didn't even really know what physical therapy was at that point in my life. It was take 6 Advil and ice it. that was PT in 1990.
Oh my gosh, I'm covering my eyes.
Oh, it's terrible. I know now. I look back on it, and they were doing the best they could. There was a lot going on. I mean, there was a stim machine too. But, I remember that.
Very helpful.
Yeah. So after that, I took a little break from running. I think my body was tired, my mind was tired, and I took a break and ended up going back into running in my mid-20s when I was working and just needed the stress relief and the outdoor activity from running. I've continued to run all my life. And, my relationship with running has changed. And, I've been in your office many, many times for that Achilles injury I have. So it's something I've had to just accommodate for and accept. And, I fight it, of course, but I also go, I need to realize that I've had a lot of fun running, and now I have a little bit different space in my life, but I still go out and still enjoy it.
I'm sorry, I'm going to probably cut you off here, Casey, because now I'm wondering, so what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from running, since you have had such a long career, but also like ups and downs along the way? What advice would you give to somebody?
Running has brought me so many amazing relationships in my life. I still have these 6 girls that were caught my freshman year. One of them we've lost, and she's not passed away. We just don't exactly know what's going on with her. But 5 of us I talk to them every week, not every week, but one of them every week right now. And we are so tight. And you get that expression, you can't have any new old friends. I just have these great relationships that hang with me. And most of them, this running has woven its way through most of them. So it's the people I've met. And that includes the people I've met that work in the industry, that sell us product in the store now, the other runners I've seen kind of go through the running life cycle, from high school runner to young adult runner to mother runner. And, I've just enjoyed meeting all the people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I grew up playing soccer. I was very competitive, but there was like a bad energy around soccer. We were a team, but not really. And then I started running cross country in high school, and that's like what a team was supposed to be like. And just the camaraderie there was incredible. And I think that the way our sport's set up, in cross country and track really sets the tone for us as adult runners, just to find that camaraderie and doing what we love and exercising together.
Yeah, it's a healthy way to socialize. It's not a glass of wine, or it's not a cup of coffee. And I mean, those are also wonderful. I do both of those. But, it's another way, because sometimes I realize, like, my husband would ask me, like, how do you know so much about that person? I'm like, well, we ran together in the morning for years, like I knew a lot about a group over my different periods of my life. I mean, we've known everything about each other. So, I mean, that's really a cool thing. And there's lessons to, like, when you're down and you work hard, or when, you can do things you thought you couldn't. But I think the biggest thing for me is the people.
I think so too. And those early morning conversations, I mean, how can you not know a lot about somebody when you're waking up really early and both maybe a little bit grouchy? I'm talking from my experience, or too hot, or whatever it is. You end up talking about everything under the sun, because an hour goes by quickly when you have someone else to talk to.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, for sure.
I know we need to ask more questions, but I love this topic of the social aspect of running, because I think that's the one part that's always there for us, not the times or the races. We can always have each other, and we can always have that sport in some form. But I think there's some sort of like wall that exertion just tears down, and just everything, like your life story, just like comes out somewhere. And that's how we end up learning so much about each other.
It's a good point. I didn't think about it like that, but I think that's very true.
Yeah, I guess you're too tired to really think about holding back any details. Maybe you shouldn't divulge, but
there's like, you're kind of euphoric at times too. You have a great workout, or you used to, and now I'm just like jogging or whatever. But even when I jog, you feel good. When you feel good, you want to listen to other people and you want to talk to other people. It's when you don't feel good that you kind of need to take some distance, right?
That's right. So the biggest thing I am interested in to talk with you, Genie, is about WestStride, but I want to hear about your early career because I know you weren't always a running store owner. So tell us about how you got started as a young professional.
So I finished up at Georgetown, and due to all the injuries, I actually thought I wanted to be in medicine. So I went back to Oklahoma, and after being in business school, I took all my pre-med requirements at like a small community college there in Oklahoma City. And then I took the MCAT. I've taken the MCAT, the GMAT, and the, what's that other one? GRE, one of them. Anyway,
GRE, yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do with my life. So after I got that far in the process, I was like, yep, I'm not meant to medical. My mind does not work like that. So I ended up moving to New York and working in banking because, that makes a lot of sense. So that's what I did. And out of there, I went to business school. So I kind of give that background. So then when I went to business school, I met my husband the first year and ended up here in Atlanta. And I took a job where I wanted to be in Atlanta to be near him. And I worked, as we called it, telecommuted, which I laughed, but that's the thing. I telecommuted to Memphis. So I worked for FedEx, and it was a great company. I really did enjoy it, but I did not enjoy telecommuting. I did not enjoy working on my own here in a quiet office or in my home. And then I would go to Memphis. Started having a little too much free time, and I was flying back and forth a lot. And I saw this article on a company franchise called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. It had just started in Forbes magazine. So I opened a 1-800-GOT-JUNK franchise. That in 2002. Yep, that was my career. And I tell you, when we started, I had no idea what it could turn into. I mean, paid less money than most people pay to buy a car to start that business. And I went out and flew out to Dallas. My dad still laughs, drove this truck all the way back from Dallas, Texas myself. I eventually ran out of energy in Alabama. I had to pull over on the side of the road. I'm going to bed. But, did that business we actually just sold our business last summer. We're still minority partners in the overall Atlanta market, but just got out of that after almost 20 years. And we're still in it, like I said, but not significantly. I guess in the middle of that, I had my first daughter. And when I had her, my husband and I, when we had her, I did not have a maternity plan. It was, oh yeah, that's my first baby. I'm going to have a little break. And then my husband decided he was going to take over the business during the break, which was extremely helpful. And that was back when there were no paternity leave. The concept of that was just like, what? But this company was wonderful. They let him take off the 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I cannot go back to work still. Right? I remember thinking, like, everyone said you could go back at 6 weeks, but I feel like I can't even see straight. So He kept going with it. And honestly, he did a little bit of time back at the consulting firm, but he never went back. So I basically no longer had a job because he took my job. So enjoyed staying home with my daughter. And then again, as my husband said, I had too much free time. So looked into the running shoe business at that point. I had a 2 or 3 year old. I was running a little bit again. I was Jeff Galloway and Phidippides were great friends. And he still has been a very good supporter of the store and of me. I actually went to him and said, how about we do something like this? And he's like, well, how about you just come work for me, learn the business and open what you want to do and open up your own store. And I was like, that'll work too, So started down that path and it worked out, it's kind of crazy really. So that was 2008. And in the middle, right as I was about to sign the lease, got pregnant with our second daughter. And that wasn't really a plan, And I remember I had the lease on my desk and I was like, okay, so this is kind of it, do I sign this lease? Because I have an out right now. I have not signed it. And I just sat there and was like, if I have to shut it down, if it doesn't go to plan, I'll give it a go. And I don't recommend that. I don't recommend opening a business and having a baby 6 weeks later, but I'm just telling you, you can struggle through.
I'm so glad you did. And it's still there. I mean, what a chance you took, right?
Oh, well, especially because I was in the hospital in September when I had her, September of 2008. And I don't know if you remember September of 2008, but I was watching whatever the CNBC equivalent was at that moment. And I'm like, why is the stock market tanking? I was wondering if it was the drugs or what was going on. And that was crazy timing. So we had a lot on for a couple of years there. It was not, I don't like to glamorize, being a young mom entrepreneur. There's a lot of stress and I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to keep it all together. And there were things I dropped for sure. it ended up working out for sure, but it wasn't easy.
It is tough. I opened my practice when Andy was not even a year old, I don't think, or right about a year old, something like that. And it's the same. It wasn't quite, right when you're having a baby, but it was right after I got sick, and it's the same thing. Sometimes you do drop some balls and you have to really figure out so much. Like you might think you know something until you start down that path, and then you realize you have no idea what you're doing. And there's so much to learn, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing I had was just this idea I wasn't going to fail. Like it wasn't going to be a massive blow up. I'm sure I wasn't going to be the best, and there were going to be some issues, but like it wasn't going to be a complete plop, Other than that, I did a lot of research. I wrote a lot of plans, and I was very lucky. I had really good early hires, and I still have really good people. And that's it. I mean, it was the people that carried me through it, and the support of family, the support of my husband, all that stuff, without it, it's very, very difficult. And then I always remember this lovely customer. She still comes in. She must have come in on a day that I was juggling a lot of balls. She was like, let me tell you my little advice. You guys have probably heard this. I had never heard it. There are rubber balls and crystal balls. She's like, just make sure you don't drop the crystal balls. I'm like, and I really do love it, but I'm thinking, ooh, which one's the, like family, your children, your marriage, your relationships. Those are the things that are hard to put back together. But, so are, bad debt. That's hard to put back together too, or a poor marketing decision. But yeah, it was good advice. So I keep it with me still.
I've never heard that before, Genie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I hadn't either.
I have actually. The idea behind that metaphor is that work is almost always made of rubber. Yeah. So if you need to drop it, it'll bounce back.
Yeah. Well, as we learned the past 18 months, you can pretty much do about anything to a business. If someone had told me well, you're going to shut down and then there's going to be this thing or makes you all sick. And I mean, I would have been like, oh, that's lovely. And who are you? And what are you talking about? So you're right. You can bounce back.
You can. And actually, that was one of our questions. This last year has been so difficult for all of us. And we shut down for a period of time as well, even though we were healthcare. But early on, we really had no idea. And we felt like it was a better service to shut down for, 8 weeks and keep everyone in. So we did. But how did you cope with what happened with COVID, and what's changed since then, or what's pivoted for you?
It was very stressful. And now when I look back on it, it's like, gosh, don't you wish you could just whisper in your ear, it's okay. It's not going to be that bad. But it was stressful. I mean, the stress of like, my children are home and are we going to get sick? I mean, in the beginning, are we going to get sick and die? Or my parents, all 4 parents were very lucky. We have alive and well grandparents and, not being able to see them and all the usual stuff. But then you compound it with like, I do have this large rent payment and, I have vendors, we need to keep orders coming. I have people who rely on me for their salary. And so, it was tough, but they were a phenomenal job by the team. Like they did stuff like we would go in one at a time for a while. We would go in teams of 2. We would work one in the front and one in the back and drive. Another person would be driving shoes around Atlanta. Crazy stuff. My coworker, Stephanie, built the website literally in a matter of days. Things that used to, she's like, Genie, this is all I can do right now. So I'm going to do this. And she sat down and got on the phone with a developer actually up in New York and just got it done. Everybody stepped up and everybody was flexible and everybody was kind of lighthearted about it when we could be. We couldn't always be that way. But I'll give a lot of credit too to the people of Atlanta and the customers we've had for years that they showed up for us. When they could buy from us, they did. And when it was safe to come in the store, whether that meant for them a bench outside or inside with masks or whatever they needed, they came. That was awesome. And our vendor partners, a couple of our vendor partners just were so flexible. We had just, one thing that I was very lucky, we had just worked with Brooks on the Olympic trials. I don't know if you remember, the Olympic trials were in Atlanta.
Yes, I do remember.
And then, how that was not a super spreader event, I will never understand because people flew in from Seattle. I was in a room with, I think, 300 people, like tight. It was a big, big event, but we had a lot of revenue come in, which was awesome. And Brooks basically said, okay, don't worry about it. And Brooks was a great partner. They said, just sit on that for a while and don't worry about your invoices. Because for like 6 weeks, there wasn't a whole lot of sales going on. And when you're a small business, you're like, whoa, they were great. They were fantastic and flexible. And then of course we paid it all up. But that was an interesting, because when those bills started coming due for these huge orders, I was like, oh my. in the middle when like the doors weren't even open. Everybody worked together very well, as we kind of all probably have our stories for that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way about my team. They were really incredible. And I felt very lucky that I had hired who I had hired, and they were really committed to the business and their patients. And I think that's really fantastic that you had that same experience. You know, in so many places, that wasn't how it was. And I think it says a lot about your leadership, people following you into that place, into that dark place, and really wanting to make it, to make it work says a lot about you.
Well, and I mean, I made mistakes too. And I think the people that gave me the grace when I made mistakes, when I was trying to balance too many things, I give them credit for that too. Because I wasn't like the perfect leader, but I did what I could do with the information I had at the time. And that's sort of all we can ask of each other, right?
That's right. I think those are lessons we learn too as athletes, I have to say. Something that we learn in the dark hours or in a team, and, you know, giving that grace and working together and figuring out a way to be successful.
It really was all about teamwork, not only the same teams helping each other, but different teams helping each other too. I always like to laugh because I found out some new skills that I was good at. And I also found out things that I was not very good at. I'm sure Kate is aware of both of those things.
I want to know what you think they were.
Okay. I was very good at telehealth.
You were actually. You were really good at telehealth.
It was because I was so lonely.
She would keep those poor people on for so long. We would say they're 30-minute appointments, and here's Casey with an hour and a half still talking to the same person because she's lonely.
Well, you know, and they had nothing to do either. So I think everybody was thrilled. I mean, we were doing weekly Zoom calls with friends back then because we could. It was great.
It was great.
Yeah, I'd be very excited to be like, oh, hello, how are you? Like, I was over the top with telehealth. I was not good at those like instructional videos we had to make about how to manage a certain body part to help out, to give some information and education to our patients who were loyal to us and supporting us still. We wanted to give them a little something, even though we couldn't see them in the clinic. It took me so long to get those done, and they were so bad.
That's the part where a couple of things we've done along those lines just take so long. And you didn't realize, like, now you understand why there's like production and pre-production and post-production of videos. I was always like, what do all these people do? They do a lot. You know, even learning Zoom, the first couple of times I was on Zoom, and like my husband and I, once we didn't mute ourselves on this, I'm like, okay, we've all you gotta like get up to speed here, people. But running stayed strong. And that's the part that I think we were really lucky too. We had something that you could continue doing. I mean, when they started closing like tennis courts, I was like, oh man, this is not good. At least, you know, running, that was never in question. You could always pop out your front door and get out there. And I loved seeing so many people walking outside and moving outside. And whether you're running or not, it was just great to see.
I don't think my parents listen to the podcast, but they like to go out to eat and to bars and things like that. And that's never been a big part of my life. So I've always felt grateful that I was still able to always get out for my run, and that it was something that could be constant throughout all of this. And it lends some sort of empathy to people who it really did affect a lot of their lifestyle and how they did things. Like, it definitely affected me, don't get me wrong, but running was something I felt really lucky to have. Running can get taken away from us at any point, but if the pandemic had somehow, we couldn't go outside or something like that, I don't know what I would do. I'd be miserable. So I try to have some empathy for that.
You'd be living with me, Casey.
It came real close there for a little bit.
I know it did. I was like, Casey, you can just move in. It's fine.
I know. I was like, Kate, if we lose the business or if I don't have a job anymore, what am I going to do? And you're like, well, you'll just come live with me. I was like, okay.
Yeah. We'll start over.
We'll start over. It'll be okay.
Yeah. There's always another.
That's right. So let's shift here a little bit. You kept mentioning how relationships are so important to you, and everything I've heard is about relationships and people. And I love that about you. And I see that in the way that you run your store and the community that you have built with your store. So I would love for you to tell us about some of the things that you do out of your store, the events and the groups that you run, because I think that's part of what makes you successful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think it's always just been a really authentic little core for me. And like I said, I was really fortunate that I had such a strong familial kind of tie to running. I loved high school and cross country. So high school, cross country and track. So when I got started, the first thing we really connected to were all those high schools around us. So that's the first community that we really tied into. You don't have to pay me to go to a high school cross country meet. I mean, I get slightly teary and goosebumpy just being near. I love it. My daughter runs and she's like, yeah, I like it, Mom. I don't think I like it quite as much as you, but I go to her, I just stand away. So and I'm like, I won't scream or anything, but I love to be there. Right. So it's kind of part of who I am. And then the next thing that was just a natural folded into the next piece was, well, I was having a baby and coming back from having a baby literally as the store opened. So like anybody who had a baby or was thinking of having a baby, we talked about it, and we talked about running. And then I got injured with my, post-baby kind of body. And that was another thing to talk about is, we've never wanted to, not that I don't want to have more stores. It would be really cool. I'm sure it'd be awesome to have like stores all over town. But for me, and with the other things I was trying to do with my life, having this really tight community just made it so much more fun. And in the end, I wanted to have a viable business and I wanted the customers to want to be there and I wanted to have fun too. And not every day, believe me, there are a lot of days that it's not fun and we work hard, but by having the one store in that community where the same people have been coming into the same store for so many years now. I mean, it's 13 years, so not like a super long time, but long enough that they really know us. We've seen folks who've gone through this whole life cycle and we've had customers kind of fold out of the running. Now they're walking, they're doing some weightlifting, but they really, they've had a knee reconstruction or they've had some things happen where they're just not running like we used to define running. So we redefine running now. I've been lucky, I think, just geographically and then kind of those natural bonds I had that they all developed into a really cool WestStride community. And then the staff that I have too, that have been there and they have their own little connections. So we have someone who's really into trail and someone who's done 70 marathons and someone who doesn't run a ton, but loves to move. And someone else who's kind of like me, like kind of retired track girl. We try to be welcoming to everybody. And that's another piece of it. I think that's important.
I think you definitely are. And people can feel that. You can feel it when you walk in the store, which is really nice. And everyone's always really approachable. And I had book signings in your store. You were so supportive of me when I wrote my books. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is just incredible how she put this on. And it was so well organized. And you can just tell how much of your heart is involved in everything you do.
Oh, thanks. No. And I mean, and honestly, there's like 2 or 3 people that I think were part of that event. I remember who their heart was there too. It really does take all of that. And that, brings me back to like when I did start, and it doesn't happen anymore. And I'm so grateful. People used to come in on a regular basis and say, so you and your husband started this all the time, ladies. It became a joke. And finally, like Will, who was like 10, Will's like 12 years younger than me, maybe 15, and probably heaved out by this. Some people would say, well, is he your husband? He's like, oh God, no. Like, Will. That's like, poor guy. I feel bad. That piece of it was crazy. I did not realize how it was unique at the time that it was a woman-owned store. I'm very grateful that is not unique anymore. And now as I've gone on in the industry, I see more and more women. One of the first trade shows that I went to with Carlin, my daughter, who I'd had right after, they would not allow me on the trade show floor with the baby. What? I kid you not. Yeah. In Dallas,
Texas. My God.
They would, and they said it was illegality. They couldn't, I had the stroller, they wouldn't allow me, and I couldn't carry her. I didn't have a Bjorn. I don't know if a Bjorn was allowed even. Thank God I brought my mother-in-law with me because it was a business trip I had taken. I think the baby she was like 8 weeks old. Now I look back on that and I'm like, can you imagine today telling somebody? And I don't think she's 13. It's not like she's 30.
That wasn't very long ago.
No, isn't that crazy? So I've always done everything I can at the time to help other women starting their business or starting their career or just looking for a little bit of advice. I'm not telling you I've got the best advice, but you know what? I'll at least stand by you on my head or say, oh, I don't know. So that's something that, I get a lot of satisfaction out of, but I also just want to help. I really do.
I feel the same way because you're right. Even though now it's more common, it's still not nearly as common as other businesses run by men. And that's very, very true. there are different challenges that are presented that you don't even know are going to be challenges until they happen, like you not being able to bring your daughter to a trade show. I would never thought that would be an issue.
It's no longer that way. I talked to another young mom, and she was like, "Oh no, I brought her on the stroller." I was like, "Thank God." Yeah, but I think women, we have a little bit, whether we're married or not married, with child, without. There's just a little bit different set of circumstances. In the past, there have been. I think again that's changing, and I hope for my daughters that it's less and less of an issue.
Yeah, I think the more people working towards that and the more we hold each other up as other business owners. And I think the less the younger girls will have to go through that. And I hope that we can all do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we will. we will continue to. Easy start.
That's right.
Yeah, early C now is like the beginning of that. I feel like the generation right now, like you guys, and then, obviously your daughters and sons. So I think the narrative is changing right now. And so hopefully 10, 15, 20 years from now, the tables will have flipped quite a bit. And it's really exciting. I always say it's still tough, but it's probably the most exciting time to be a woman in recent history. So
yeah, well, it's great. Beyond it just being, it's the right thing to do to have women owning businesses and women leading organizations. It also is like really smart, because the best thing I did was hire a lot of women. I have great men too. There are great men that work at WestStride, but a lot of the women who work at WestStride, could connect with a lot of the female customers. And it was like a differentiator, and it was unintentional. It just happened that way. I have one coworker who's the best, Virginia. She always,
Virginia. I love
Virginia. Yeah. I mean, she just toots my horn all the time. She'll not let anyone walk out of here like, I'm not like that. I really don't like to say I'm the owner. Like, I don't even wear my own shirts a lot of the time. I like to I like to be in the background and observing, I think, more than I do in the front. And Virginia will not let me walk through the store without saying, she's a woman. She owns this. I mean, she's, great. And I always am surprised how many people really value that. And I shouldn't be. I should be. And I'm very grateful for it and humbled, but I am fascinated by it at times too. And then I guess when the tables turn, though, when I go out and meet other women who are doing really cool things, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And same as you, both of you.
I interviewed someone last week and they said, wait, you're the owner?
Yeah. Oh, no.
And I was like, no. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
It was a funny moment. They're like, oh, and they were really, they were surprised in a good way, but they were like, oh, I thought it was a big corporation and I didn't think that I would be speaking to the owner. It was just very funny. So I can relate to that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a good thing. I wish I was more of a promoter in personality in some ways. That's part of not all, that's part of my being a woman. I was kind of a little quieter and at times, not always. My husband would not agree with that at all. If he ever hears this, he's going to be like, what is she talking about? But, I did enjoy not always having to be on, I guess. That might be a better way of putting it. There are people who can do that.
Yeah, I don't think you have to. I mean, for me, just watching both of you do what you do and just leading by example, I think that's plenty. It's more than enough. Because for me, I love seeing women do things and, run the world. It's not necessarily my personality, but I love to see it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, we all agree on that.
I know. So Jeannie, some of the other things that we wanted to talk about were obviously running shoe related. We try to keep up with all the trends and really understand what's happening in the industry, but it's not our industry. So we rely on people like you to kind of let us know. So what is going on in the running industry right now? What are some of the big changes that are happening, whether it's clothes or shoes or technology?
Yeah, well, you need a degree in supply chain logistics to really understand all the things going on. I'd say number one right now, that is number one, as far as availability, what's going to happen over the next 12 months with availability of product and how it's going to get to us. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of top of mind of every store owner right now. Behind that, there's some amazing progress, innovation in footwear, and races are coming back. So there's some exciting, finally people get to use these things. Really use them. Masses do, more than the top 20 marathoners in the world. Really, I think for us, we're seeing a lot of casual footwear, of course, because everyone's walking around in casual footwear. We're seeing a lot of lightweight options shoes that weren't as lightweight before. And we're seeing a lot of carbon plates and big puffy midsoles. And they all have a place. You don't need all of them, you know? So when people come in, well, you might need the casual shoe and something else. When people come in, we're really just having a conversation now about, well, what do you really want to do in these particular shoes? Because the breadth of customer we have now is amazing. So we've got somebody who is just trying to, is staying active in the pandemic and older. We've got someone who's younger and becoming active. We've got somebody who's trying to race, somebody who's doing fitness classes at home, somebody who's doing something else outside of their house, and a lot of new trail type runners too, folks out on trails, out hiking in the outdoors. So the trends for us are just hoping we have product, planning to have product, find more product than we need right now to have product next year, and then accommodating these folks as they come in with some of this new and exciting stuff that we've missed out on. On apparel, it's just awesome to, be back again, using some of the stuff that they haven't used for years, or for a year and a half. Like, we didn't sell as many singlets and as many speedy shorts. We have a really strong apparel business at WestStride, and we've actually seen that grow quite a bit over the past year. And that's awesome. That's a positive of the pandemic. We hope to just maintain it. We hope to at least be able to hold some of that. What's available and what we can get is also a big question. And once we get out of this and the supply chain issues begin to naturally resolve, the world keeps opening up, I think the big future and the big story is going to have to be the environment and how all of these products impact where we live, how we live, and can we live a little more sustainably with this stuff? Because it's not a clean industry. It's not terrible, but it could be better. And all of us have a part to play in that as consumers and as owners.
I remember the pictures coming out of being able to see the Himalayas for the first time in years after all the planes had stopped flying. And, there was travel was halted in cars. And I just, at that moment, it was so shocking to me. I know that we have such an impact on the environment, but to see it that clearly in that moment was really incredible.
Yeah, we're tearing it up in the universe right now. And I don't mean to make light of it. I hope that is where some emphasis, some energy, and maybe some of, this newfound love of the outdoors. Hopefully some of that will be, channeled towards creating more environmentally friendly running footwear and running apparel.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, so Jeannie, I think we're getting close to wrapping up, but is there anything that you're excited about with the store, anything new on the horizon, anything that you're really jazzed about?
Oh yeah. I'm excited about it. We're just easing back into group runs. We kind of slowly brought them back. So we are, starting back with our brew run every month and getting better, a lot more people showing up for that and having a good time. Again, that community that go for a run and have a beer piece. And then our Saturdays, probably in November, we might finally have our first really big Saturday run, which we haven't done in a while. We've had them, but not the numbers. We used to have 100 plus. I'm not sure I really want to go there right now, but we're getting close. And then, we're excited for a somewhat normal holiday season and connecting with all the customers that we see over the Thanksgiving break and half marathon, whatever that looks like for them. It's just going to be nice to get back into 2022 and sort of a more normal start to the year. I believe, I hope that's what we're going to get.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, I know.
Well, we have 3 questions that we've been asking everybody at the end of the podcast. We want to ask you these questions now. Are you ready?
Sure.
They're not scary. No,
Okay.
They're good. What is the thing that you regularly do to take care of yourself?
I have started, Kate, you'll love this. My oldest daughter loves yoga, and I also enjoy yoga. I was going regularly before the pandemic, once a week, but now I go once a week with her, and it's so cool. We go in the morning before school 1 day a week. I really enjoy it. I look forward to it. It's on Wednesday mornings.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So that's a little take care of myself and spend time with her, which is also taking care of myself.
Yeah, it is. That's great.
Yeah, great. Our second question is, what is bringing you joy right now?
I've been in the store a lot more right now because staffing's tough. I'm not going to lie. And I am having a great time. I really am. I have been today. I was just laughing as I was leaving the shop, and there's always some silliness that goes on in the back, but I just left there. I said, thanks guys. I had a fantastic time laughing about I don't remember what it was. Something with we were folding T-shirts and how one person just wasn't able to do it. And, I'm enjoying the community of coworkers right now more than, coming off this week where I've worked Saturday, Sunday, and today. But I'm not complaining. It was fun. We had a great time. And the customers while we've been there too. With some good people.
It makes a huge difference when you can laugh and find yourself.
Yeah. Somebody tripped, I remember, and someone else was laughing at them. And I was like, but it really was fun. I don't know how quite to describe that, but it was a fun day at work.
That's awesome. We have a lot of those too, where there's so much roaring laughter. You wonder what's happening. And sometimes it's about the smallest thing that most people wouldn't laugh at, but for some reason in our little community, it's hilarious.
Yeah, I think when you're stuck in the back, like we say in little stockroom a little too long, everything gets a little funny.
Okay, Genie, our last question is, so what is, we would say, your kryptonite? Like, what is the one thing that you love so much to do or to eat or to be part of that you just absolutely could not live without?
I thought kryptonite was the thing that not killed, but that made Superman.
Well,
like, wait a minute.
Actually
I need some clarification on this question. I guess you tell me. Is it like wine? Did I have too much wine?
The one thing that, you just couldn't live without, the one thing that you really need to survive.
Yeah.
You're right. We have to think about that, Casey.
Oh gosh, but
I'm Googling it right now, so I'll update you.
How about if one thing that over the past year I really have needed, and I'm not an ooey gooey love story marriage with my husband, but my husband has been unbelievably supportive in the last year. We've had a lot of stuff go on, and but he's a small business owner as well, and we sold a business, and we did, and I just couldn't have done the year without him, and I am not one to really publicly acknowledge my love very often, but it was really, he was a heck of the ultimate team player over the past year.
That's fantastic. Well, now he has to listen to it.
And he might. He just might, especially if I tell him at the end. Yeah, don't say a word. Let's see if he makes it to the end.
So I Googled it, and I'm not going to embarrass us by reading the definition, but we have to change that question.
That's okay.
That's great.
We're just going to work on the assumption that people aren't going to Google the exact definition of kryptonite and just go with it.
Well, now they are. Now that you've brought it up, they're totally Googling it, and so am I.
I just was a child of that Superman. I loved that movie. I mean, this movie, or I don't remember movie or shows.
Oh, that's funny. Well, thank you, Genie. It'll only make us better.
Exactly. There we go.
There you are, mentoring us without even knowing it.
I don't know about that, but yeah, just because I watched Superman as a child.
All right. Well, we are so glad you came tonight and decided to have this conversation with us. I'm really happy. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's good for me, and I appreciate you asking questions and wanting to hear the story. And also, I've been secretly listening to some of your earlier podcasts too. And not secretly, I've been listening. I've really enjoyed it. Podcasts are something I got into over the pandemic.
Yeah, it's fun.
Continues for me. Yeah, they're great.
Oh, and Genie, the one thing I always forget to ask is, how can people find you?
You can find us at WestStride.com. We're right off I-75 and West Paces Ferry Road. There by the Houstons, we always say. So get a burger, come see me.
Well, thank you so much, Genie.
Yeah,
thank you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that it resonated with you and that you learned something. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps increase our visibility within the platform so that more awesome people like you can find us.
If you'd like to support us further, pretty please, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/morethanmiles. That's www.patreon.com/morethanmiles. Or for a few dollars, you can help the show grow and keep going, as well as receive exclusive perks like monthly Q&As with us. Until next time, remember to run the mile you're in, and that training is so much more than miles.